Hi guys, welcome back. We're going to be talking about indoor air pollution. This is module 50. It's also the last module for our Unit 7 Part 1. So this is the last module you'll need to know before you take your Unit 7 Part 1 exam. And this will sort of wrap up air pollution actually. So we're getting close to being done. Let's look at learning objectives. After reading this module, you should be able to explain how indoor air pollution differs in developing and developed countries and describe the major indoor air pollutants and the risks associated with them. Okay, so first let's look at indoor air pollution in developing countries. Now, we've actually kind of already talked about this in our energy unit because we were talking about how in developing countries, sometimes the primary source of energy, specifically heat energy, comes from burning things like biomass, so wood, animal manure, and potentially coal if you have access to it, and potentially charcoal. Now, a lot of times people are using these types of things to heat the insides of their homes or to cook. The problem with burning these inside is that, of course, you have the particulate matter associated with burning wood and animal manure, and we already know the respiratory sort of illnesses that can come from that. But of course, the types of conditions that this wood and this animal manure and this charcoal are potentially being burned in lead to the incomplete combustion of wood or animal manure, which can lead to something like carbon monoxide being emitted. So you can imagine if you're in a small enclosed space burning wood to heat your home or to cook something, you're going to be releasing a lot of carbon monoxide and particulate matter. So this can lead to respiratory infections, things like pneumonia, bronchitis, and then over long periods of time, eventually things like lung cancer. It could also be like an eye and a throat irritant as well to have all of that smoke near your face. Now let's look at indoor air pollution in developed countries. So it's sort of interesting. We also in our energy unit talked about how great of a job we're doing at sealing our houses out to outside from the outside world and how good we're being at insulating them. Now this is really great in terms of energy efficiency. We're not letting heat in, we're not letting heat out, we're not letting cold in, and we're not letting cold out. So from an energy efficiency standpoint, we're doing a really great job. But the problem is without proper airflow, a lot of the things that your home is made up of, a lot of the plastics, a lot of the paints, a lot of the glues, a lot of the furniture that you buy is actually made up of these toxic chemicals that if they build up over long periods of time, you actually end up inhaling. A lot of them are actually VOCs, and you've talked about VOCs already. They're those volatile organic compounds that have those really, really pungent smells, and we'll talk about what those look like or specific examples of those in your house or in new houses in general. So just a general overview before we get into the specifics here. So we have household products like pesticides, paints, and cleaning fluids. Those are all going to contain VOCs. If you've ever sprayed a pesticide or painted before or sprayed Clorox bleach spray, you know they're very pungent smelling. Those are all VOCs. Furniture, carpets, foams, insulated pressed woods, those all have a very pungent smell to them. Those are VOCs as well. And they also contain something called formaldehyde. Formaldehyde is also a VOC, and we'll talk a little bit more about what formaldehyde does and why that's a problem. Tobacco smoke, you're familiar with. Lead-based paints, we've talked about. Asbestos. The asbestos is the one that if you or a loved one has ever had mesothelioma or has been diagnosed with mesothelioma, that's asbestos. Now, oftentimes asbestos is what's used in insulation or in the tiles that are sometimes in old schools, not Sage, but much older schools. And then radon. Radon is a radioactive gas that is sitting in the soils of sitting in soil that's generally underneath our homes that could potentially leak in if there's cracks in the foundation. We'll talk about that a little bit more. And then, of course, good old carbon monoxide, which we'll talk about more as well, starting now. So carbon monoxide, we've talked about it being a pollutant outside of the home, but inside of the home, Generally, carbon monoxide comes from malfunctioning exhaust systems or household furnace heating systems. So usually your natural gas heaters. So if your home is being heated or your water heater is being heated with natural gas, if that system malfunctions in any way, a common byproduct of that is carbon monoxide. We know carbon monoxide is colorless and odorless, and it basically binds to your hemoglobin, which is what actually transports oxygen throughout your body. And because carbon monoxide bonds so much better to your hemoglobin than oxygen does, carbon monoxide will take over, and it will basically prohibit your body from efficiently transporting oxygen, which it needs, and basically you don't get any oxygen in your brain, and then eventually you die. So maintaining your exhaust systems and your furnace heating systems are important in preventing this, or ensuring that you have some sort of carbon monoxide sensor in your house that will prevent you from not knowing that you're being exposed to this. All right, asbestos. So asbestos is not something that's actually used in the United States anymore because it's been found to be so cancerous. And really the effects of it are lung cancer, and that's what mesothelioma is, if you remember us talking about that in class. But generally it's used for insulation in a home, or in, again, like I mentioned, old ceiling tiles, or these things called popcorn ceilings. These they don't do this anymore, but it was really, really good at providing insulation. They even used it on hot water pipes, things like that. Now, asbestos was actually okay as long as it wasn't being messed with. So the people who were most susceptible to getting asbestos sort of inhalation were people who were working with it and people who are removing it. So if it was just sitting in your home, it probably wasn't a problem. But as soon as you start moving it around and disrupting those fibers, and it becomes airborne and you have the ability to inhale it, that's when it becomes a problem. And years and years and years of inhaling asbestos, that's what leads to those lung cancers. So if there are old buildings now, a lot of like old schools, not Sage, but old schools will have asbestos in their ceiling tiles. If that needs to be removed, you have to have somebody who's trained to remove asbestos come in, because they found that asbestos can actually remain in the air and become worse over time after it's been disturbed. So it has to be removed extremely carefully and by people who know how to remove it, and then dispose of it properly. And here are those thin, fibrous silicate minerals that they described. Okay, radon. Radon is a radioactive gas. It's a natural part of the natural decay process of uranium, and we know uranium is naturally abundant in our soils, rocks, things like that. So radon is something that in its gaseous state can seep upward. It can go into your house through cracks in your foundation from rock or soil, or even groundwater if your house is sitting on a large supply of groundwater. Essentially, it can attach itself to dust or other particles that are sitting in your home, and then it can be inhaled by you. People think that, or not people, the EPA actually thinks that about 21,000 people die annually from radon-induced lung cancer. That's the second leading cause of lung cancer in the world after smoking. So smoking, tobacco products, vapor products, that's the number one cause of lung cancer. The second most is radon, and it's completely, you would never know you were inhaling radon, right? So some people have their house tested for radon, especially if they know they're in an area where there's a large amount of radon in the soil. They'll have people, maybe like right before they buy a home, they'll have people come and test for radon in the air, gaseous radon, to see if there's any present, to see if they even want to live there, things like that. So normally if you had like a basement, that's where you would check first. It can get into your water supply. It's pretty dangerous, actually, and it's something that most people don't know about. So if you live in an area where there's a high amount of radon, that's the darker blue, it's kind of cut off here, but you'll see California is low to moderate. Southern California has a little bit more than Northern California. But these areas up here that are in the higher range of where radon is present, that's where you'd really want to check your house more regularly for radon exposure. Okay, and I told you we'd come back to VOCs in our home products. So a lot of VOCs in glues and paints, and then I mentioned formaldehyde. So formaldehyde is used in things like particle board and carpeting glue. Particle board is something you're actually probably more familiar with than you think. It's a lot of furniture these days is not made of solid wood. Solid wood would be like if you cut a slice out of a tree and you built your bed frame out of that, that would be solid wood. But particle board is what a lot of cheaper furniture products and home products are made out of, and it's basically a bunch of mashed up wood compacted together. It's not as heavy as wood. It's much softer. It will break more easily. It's a really common thing for furniture to be made out of now. But the formaldehyde from the particle board and the carpeting glue is what actually gives those homes their new home smell. So if you've ever been through a brand new house that's just been built and you walk in and you're like, it's got that new home smell, you're really smelling formaldehyde that's been probably put in from carpeting glue. Or maybe there's new furniture in the home like cabinetry or something like that. Now, if you are exposed to a lot of these types of things, glues and paints and formaldehydes in new homes, your eyes and throat will burn, perhaps breathing difficulties, and over a long period of time, formaldehyde is carcinogenic, so it will cause cancer. And this is sort of the extreme here, but there is something called sick building syndrome, and this is sort of a buildup of tons of VOCs. So really you see this more commonly in like new buildings, new homes, things like that. New office buildings are actually the most common place that you see this, where they've recently put down a lot of brand new carpet, where they've used a lot of carpet glue, where they've put in a lot of brand new furniture. And there's not enough ventilation. There's inadequate or faulty ventilation. They've used a lot of chemical contamination from the indoor sources, so like carpets and cabinets and things like that. Perhaps chemical contamination is coming in from the outside, so things like radon. And off-gassing. Off-gassing is what you get when you put in a lot of formaldehyde-based glues and paints and chemicals, which is why it's more common in office buildings. And if it can't properly ventilate, a really large buildup of this is going to cause people to have nausea, headaches, throat and eye irritation, fatigue. So sometimes brand new office buildings, when they move a bunch of people in, a lot of the new employees will start to feel sick in that building because it still has this smell that's really bothering people. Okay, and that was sort of the last big idea here and the last big idea for Unit 7, Part 1. So we'll go over a couple quick practice questions. Feel free to pause and not listen to me while this is going on. So which outdoor air pollutant is also a significant indoor pollutant? In this case, the answer is carbon monoxide. There's just as much carbon monoxide outside as there is inside. In fact, carbon monoxide, we said, is the result of an incomplete combustion reaction. So starting your car every day releases some carbon monoxide. So just as much outside as there is inside. Primary source of radon is D, rocks and soils. That's where it comes from, underground usually, and is a byproduct of uranium breaking down, or the radioactive decay of uranium. Sick building syndrome. The most common cause of sick building syndrome is the result of off-gassing, so excessive amounts of formaldehyde, glues, chemicals, things like that. And then asbestos is A, causes respiratory ailments and cancer. We know that the inhalation causes that mesothelioma that people like to say. All right, guys, let me know if you have any questions, and I'll see you in class. Have a good day.